Hi, this is Janet with Cyber Seams, and today I'm making Star Trek inspired Christmas stockings. First, you can download this free pattern at cyberseams.com. I'm using the basic stocking pattern. It's easy to print and assemble. Just line up the lines and letters and tape the pieces together. Using the grid on my cutting board to line up the pattern, I added 3 inches to the length. I'm using a crushed velour for my stockings with a faux fur cuff. If you're using a velvet or other fabric with a raised nap or direction to it, make sure your pattern piece is oriented in the proper direction. Remember, if you cut your pieces out separately, to flip the pattern for the other side, or else you'll end up with 2 of the same halves. Next, I cut out 2 pieces of interfacing. This helps the stocking hold its shape. And finally, cut out 2 pieces of lining. I used black satin on mine. Now I sew the interfacing to each of the velour pieces. If you're using a fabric that can be ironed, you can then use iron-on facing. My fabric can't be ironed, so I'm using sew-in facing. I also prepped some other stockings, since I'm making more than one. Sew around all of the edges. I'll stitch around the edge about 1/4 inch. Now pin both sides together and stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Trim close to the seam and clip the corners. Now sew the lining pieces right sides together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Do not flip it right side out when you're finished. Flip the stocking right side out and put the lining into it, wrong sides together so that all the raw edges will be hidden. Match the seams and pin along the upper edge. Baste about 1/4 inch along the top edge. If your fabric frays as badly as mine does, also zigzag stitch or serge the edge to keep the fraying to a minimum. Remember when you cut your fabric to follow the direction of the fur or velvet or whatever you're using. And as before, remember to cut the opposite side if you're cutting your pieces separately. Also, cut out 2 pieces of the cuff in a lining material. Here I just used some unbleached muslin. With the right sides together on both the cuff and the cuff lining, pin and sew the side edges using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. On the fur cuff, trim the seam allowance. On the cuff lining, press the seams out. Now turn the cuff right side out and slip the cuff lining over it, keeping the right sides together. make sure to match up the seams. Pin along the bottom edge and stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Trim the seam allowance and clip all of the corners. Flip the cuff right side out. Pin the top edge of the cuff and baste it together. Now we need to make a loop to hang the stocking. You can either use a ribbon or you can sew your own loop out of matching fabric. I'm using the furry white material from the cuff for mine. If you are using fur, trim the extra out of the seam allowance. This will make it easier to stitch and turn the right side out later. Now fold in half and pin. Sew along the long edge only, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. To turn it right side out, just put a safety pin on one edge, then thread it through the center. It will pull the fabric through along with it. Whether you use ribbon or a fabric loop, fold it in half and stay stitched the end. If you're sewing bulkier fabrics as I am, you may need to clip the top of your stocking for ease. Now with your cuff right side out, slip it into your stocking. Match the side seams and pin the top edges together. Remember to slip the loop in there. Tuck the loop in and line up the raw edge with the top of the stocking. Stitch a 1/2 inch from the edge. Grade the seam by trimming the cuff back. Now zigzag or serge along the edge. And finally flip the cuff out. Now you have a fully lined stocking. Add a badge if you've got one, and you're done.